Welcome everyone. Today we're going to do a quick overview of dynamic privileged access for connecting to your Linux infrastructure specifically. Now, the first thing to note is dynamic privileged access can work in conjunction with CyberArk's Privilege Cloud to leverage vaulted credentials. This is relatively new to this page, so if you've seen this before, you may not have noticed this vaulted credentials tab. This is here now and it is available. There are two options when it comes to leveraging dynamic privileged access. The first is, like I said, that vaulted credentials option. The second is through zero standing privileges. We'll talk about the differences in a moment, but I really want to showcase kind of the user workflow or user experience. Now, if a user was to log in, typically they would not see all of these different pages or links. They would only see connection guidance and MFA caching. The connection guidance is really here to do exactly what it says, guide the user on establishing connections through DPA, whether that is for RDP, SSH, databases, or Kubernetes. Again, in this session, we'll focus on Linux or SSH-based connections. And when I select this link, it takes me to this page that shows both options, zero standing privileges, vaulted credentials. I'm going to go through vaulted connections or vaulted credentials first, as most of our users, if they are CyberArk customers, will understand this a little bit better. And then we'll take a look at zero standing privileges. So the first step with the vaulted credential is obviously knowing information about the credentials. I've gone ahead and taken the liberty of opened up Privilege Cloud to show that I have some vaulted usernames, in this case Ubuntu, for 3 separate Linux hosts. And these are in fact SSH keys that are under management, under rotation, and I am able to use through traditional means, SSH via PSM or PSMP. I'm also able to use them through a parallel method or through DPA. Now, the first thing I would do is type in the username that I would like to use. After that, I would provide the target system that username needs to connect to. This is important because, as you saw, I have 3 separate accounts with the username Ubuntu. In a real organization, you might have thousands of accounts with the same name. We need to make sure we specify the target address as well. After that, there are some optional fields that I'm not going to fill out for this session. Really, this field is only relevant for domain accounts. And the next field is relevant if you've set your connector pools up to use logical networks. Connector pools, we'll talk more about that later or in a follow-on session, but really think of it as a logical grouping of connectors that we use to establish the connection to the target system. Now, down here at the bottom, I am given some instructions on how I'm able to use this connection, right? So first, I can easily just take and copy this connection command easily with the little copy button here, bring up my terminal of choice, put that in, and if I'd like to use it, I can use it straight from here. Now, I have an issue in my terminal emulator or in iTerm that for some reason does not escape this pound sign, so I'm going to go ahead and escape it with a backslash. But to really quickly go over what we're doing is we're first entering in the username that you're going to authenticate to the ISPSS or CyberArk Identity Security Platform service with. We're then providing this little piece of information, which is your tenant's unique name or subdomain. After that, we're providing the username or vaulted account we would like to use. Lastly, or second to last, is the target system we would like to connect to. And then lastly is the DPA connector that we're going to connect through. Now, once I put this in, I should be presented with the appropriate authentication information. So I authenticate with my first factor. I then choose to complete my second factor via text, at which case I have received the text now and I'm going ahead and approving that. And after that is done, DPA is basically going to check, does Joseph even have access to this account? Do we have the ability to establish a route to that target system? And if so, let's go ahead and broker that session. And in this case, you can actually see I had a small error. I tried to connect to the wrong target system. So let's go ahead and update that really quickly. So I was actually trying to connect to some Kubernetes systems and I put the wrong target in. So let's go ahead and put in the leader and try that again, right? So I'll go ahead and put in the appropriate credentials again. and complete my multi-factor authentication. And in a moment, I'll talk about how you can kind of improve this experience a little bit using a few different methods or a few different actions. So I should have the appropriate target host now, and I've gone through the authentication, and you see that I am indeed connected to that target host, right? So if I do host name, it is that K8SL. I do who am I am that Ubuntu user. I can do like IPA to get information, etc. And I can do now whatever I need to do as that Ubuntu user. When I'm done with my session, I can go ahead and exit out, and it is just that simple. Now, switching back, if I come over and look, there's also a second method provided, right? So we provide an alias that you can utilize. Basically, you would set this alias up. Right now, it's currently supported for macOS and Linux, but the alias would allow you to basically perform a single command to actually make this connection. So let me go ahead and update the address here as I put it in wrong before. That dynamically updates the information down here in the connection guidance. And when I copy this, if I come back into my terminal, I'll go ahead and clear this out, and I paste that in this scenario, there is basically going to go through that same authentication, right? So I'm going through the authentication, I'm going to go through and complete the second factor. But what is different here is when I use this CyberSSO connection method, we are actually going to download a short-term certificate or a key, and this key is going to be valid or supported for 2 hours. At least in my environment, that is how I have it configured. You can configure this as an optional feature where this basically MFA caching is taking place. And what this would allow me to do is if I exit this session and I need to connect to that again, I will go ahead and run the same exact command again. In this scenario, I have a valid key, so I do not need to re-authenticate. The key that you set up for the MFA caching is completely configurable by the administrator. So if I come over and I look at settings here, you can configure how long that key is valid for. So we can see right here, MFA caching is set to on. The MFA caching period can be anywhere from 5 minutes to 720 minutes. This is important because as an end user, right, if I'm going to be SSHing to, let's say, 10, 20, 30 different targets, and every single time I have to go through the MFA process, that could be a little bit cumbersome and might cause some MFA fatigue. We still don't just want them to be able to continually authenticate all day long or for multiple days by having a static key on their desktop. But at least in this scenario, we can allow them to use a cached credential. Additionally, I do believe we can set a password requirement on that key. I have to validate that, but the key here is that we can support having this cached MFA key for the end user. So personally, I have set up that CyberSSO capability that allows me to basically run an alias. It runs the alias as expected and does everything I need to do. Again, the first scenario was us using vaulted credentials. Now I want to switch over and take a look at using a non-vaulted credential and talk a little bit about how that works. So if we come back into the user interface and go back to connection guidance, for this, basically, if you're doing zero standing privileges, you have 2 options. On-premise targets, in which case you would specify kind of an actual FQDN. So this would be a single Linux target in my environment. Let me go ahead and put that in. Or cloud targets. Now, cloud targets, those are going to be specified differently. They can either be IP. For AWS, they can also be like instance ID. And we'll talk a moment about why that's important. Oh, and I apologize, I was actually on RDP here. Let's go over to SSH. So for zero standing privileges, this could be FQDN on-premise or instance ID if it's on in a cloud environment. And if I go ahead and put this in, so let's go ahead and put in that lin target 01. again, I'm given that the proper instructions. Really, this command is pretty much exactly the same. The only difference is it doesn't specify what account I would like to use. Similarly, if you look at the Cyber SSO command, there's no account specified. It just specifies a specific target. So let's go ahead and use this Cyber SSO since that's what we've been doing so far. And I'll go ahead and copy that. I will come here and I will put this into place. And this should check, make sure that I'm already authenticated. It's going to check to see if we can route and connect to that actual host. If so, it's going to connect me to that session. And in this case, it connects me in as root. Well, you might be wondering, why did it connect you in as root? How did you specify what user? That is all done via policy. We're going to go over policy in a moment. But in this case, the policy says if a user in this group attempts to connect to this specific server or range of servers, connect them as root, right? If a user is in a different group, we might connect them as a different user on the end system. Now, in this case, the user that we're connecting as does need to exist on the end system in order for this to work. Alternatively, I can also connect using something like instance ID for AWS, for example. So as a quick example, if I do Cyber SSO here and I put in an instance ID, I'm just searching for one I did previously, but this is a random instance ID in AWS. If I make this connection, again, it checks. It says, hey, you've already authenticated. The key is valid. You don't need to get a new key. Wow, what's going on here? In this case, I actually have two separate policies that are applied. One says Joe can connect as the EC2 user. The other says Joe can connect as himself because this host is integrated with SSSD. So at this point, if I choose to and connect as myself, basically what is happening is DPA is generating a certificate that is valid for a certain period, I believe 5 minutes. That certificate contains my username as the principal. The host is configured to trust our certificate authority for connections. And now I am connected to this target system as myself. Now that I'm here, I can do whatever work I need to do, right? Let's just do an ls and see what's in my directory. So let's say I need to run this script, right? I need to connect, run this script. I don't have permission to run it. I wonder why. It looks like it's trying to look into the root directory, which my user doesn't have. So if I run sudo and go ahead and run that script, it actually runs, right? So my user must have some privileges because I'm doing that sudo command and it is running the script. Let me try to go ahead and run the other script, which says modified, and see what that one does. And it looks like I'm being prompted by EPM, which is another CyberArk product, to provide a justification. So in fact, sudo is not controlling my privileges. I'm controlling my privileges centrally via EPM, and EPM specifically calls out a certain script that I'm able to run while blocking other scripts. So I would just say, demonstration. And after that, I would exit because I'm not even sure what that user's password is. If we take a look at those two scripts, let's see what the first one was, modified script. And if we look at the other, the script contents are actually the exact same, which is weird. But what we're doing here is we're using EPM to approve or allow scripts to be ran based on the hash of the script itself, right? So even though the scripts are exactly the same, have the exact same contents, they have different file names, and we have specifically allowed this script based on the hash of the script. So I think this is a pretty cool example of using DPA to get just-in-time access through a short-term validity period certificate, and then using EPM to control what privileges my user has on that Linux system. Now, before we wrap up, I did say this video was going to be short, but I was completely wrong there. I want to go over just a little bit about auditing and troubleshooting and session diagnostics. So if for some reason users are not able to use that connection guidance and things are not working as expected, what we can do is we can look in session guidance or session diagnostics and see exactly kind of where things are failing, right? So in this case, my user authenticated using an MFA caching key. I have two policies that have been created that match. One is for SSSD and one is for normal access. I actually chose the SSSD policy. That's why it allowed me to authenticate as myself. And after that, we created the tunnel. And lastly, we made the connection to the target system. So that's a great amount of information on why this may or may not be working. It looks like one of my coworkers is having some issues here where they're not able to create a session tunnel. So I will need to go in and look and see kind of what is going on there. Why is the handshake failing for this person but not for others? So that's something that I can take a look at. Now I know a very easy place to start looking, and I can look at help documents, etc., to try to troubleshoot that. Similarly, if we look at like this Ubuntu use case, it's a little bit shorter because basically I'm using a vaulted account and we're checking that account out, we're connecting to this specific target, and then we're done. Now, on top of session diagnostics, we also have audit information about what users are doing within the sessions. So activities such as command audit, this is all here, right? So we have a command audit. I don't know what this one is exactly going to be auditing, but we'll take a look at it. And then, so we can see here, it's that same target that I've been working on, the service data. It just basically is when I catted out that modified script, right? So we do have this information, right? Let me go ahead and exit this session and minimize this. On top of that, we also have kind of session monitoring information, right? It shows that, hey, there's active session for Adam. There is a session for Joe. The session is over. That means it's ended if it has a check mark, right? The target was this instance in AWS. The protocol was SSH, and the access method was just in time. Conversely, the access method here was vaulted, right? So we can distinguish very easily between use of vaulted accounts via DPA or use of just-in-time access via DPA. If I go in and expand here, it tells you a little bit more information, what commands I ran, and this will be kind of the whole command list in this scenario. So a lot of detail that we have about what's going on, the source that the user started from, the target they connected to, etc., the target user they accessed as. So this is a great place to kind of come in and inspect what was actually occurring within sessions. I'll leave you with that for how DPA is from a user experience point of view. And if there are any questions, please post them in the video. Thank you for your time.